award goes to More Than Me Foundation.
On the surface, it was a great story. A young American woman devoting her life to underprivileged girls in Liberia. Wearing the name of one of those girls written on her forehead, she spoke of the need.
There should be no little girl forced to work on the streets.
Katie Meyler established a school for girls, winning her acclaim and her charity millions of dollars from donors in the U.S. and around the world.
My name is Macintosh and Johnson. It is West Point.
But the school's co-founder was discovered to be sexually abusing many of those girls and arrested. Then Ebola hit.
An international health crisis.
And the world's media, including CBC News, descended on Liberia.
For orphans and children who have been in contact with Ebola and nobody kind of wants to take them in.
Meyler became a media star, telling one news organization after another about her new effort to save children orphaned by Ebola.
Time even featured her incredible work in their Person of the Year issue.
Now, this documentary and investigative report by ProPublica in the U.S. delves deeper into how the charity and Meyler herself handled those earlier allegations.
We had heard rumors, I believe it was from his ex-wife, that she said that he was, that he was into young, small girls.
Time magazine co-published the report. It now says that alongside her charity's noteworthy work has emerged a horrific story of child abuse and sexual exploitation. Meyler has temporarily stepped aside, and several investigations have been launched in Liberia and the U.S. Finn Young is the investigative reporter who wrote the story. He joins us from New York. Finn, much of what's in your investigative report focuses on Katie Meyler. What is it she is alleged to have done wrong?
Well, Katie Meyler is someone who arrived in Liberia and saw a lot of need, as a lot of people who arrived in Liberia in those post-war years did. She set up an organization without very much experience, but with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of ability to raise funds. But on the ground, right from the beginning, she empowered a man who she believed had been a former child soldier. His name was Macintosh Johnson. She gave him power over the children, and then for a number of years, according to what these girls told authorities, he was able to abuse them in really terrible ways. But I think it's a wider question, Diana, which is about the duty of care in relation to children when you're someone who's coming from the outside seeking to help them. And in this organization, the duty of care and the caution that is involved in a really complex environment, they really didn't take those steps to make sure the kids were safe.
As we showed, Time magazine once featured her as a hero in the Ebola crisis. Now it has posted the story that you've written. How important is that in your view?
I think it's a very brave step, and I think it's something which is good, because it shows a sense that when you come into a place as a journalist, and I've done this myself, and you don't know it that well, you're looking for a story, and there's this often quite symbiotic relationship between the international news media and organizations on the ground. But of course, that the atmosphere really changes if you look at those actors on the ground, not just as positive change makers, but as potentially people who can have a negative impact. And I think that in this case, it's a really good acknowledgement that on the ground, perhaps some of the news media really didn't quite look deep enough into this organization.
It doesn't appear, though, that the allegations about the charity were covered at all at the time outside of Liberia. So how much could the international media have reasonably known about what had been alleged as they arrived to cover Ebola?
Well, there were a few small news stories initially after his arrest, but then almost immediately after, as you know, Ebola hit. So I think that international news, certainly it was possible to know. People on the ground knew that something had happened, but the details were never fully available because the organization was never transparent about what had actually taken place and where, and also the status of this man who had committed these acts.
As you say, the organization painted this as something that might happen in Liberia, a consequence of trying to rescue these girls and really laying it on Liberian culture. But you make the point in ProPublica that you approached your investigation as though this took place anywhere. Why was that important?
Well, I think that there's a sense where those girls have been let down because there's a belief that somehow different standards should apply just because Liberia is a place that is poor. And I think that that's problematic because it means that the response to what happened was different. Now, for us as investigative journalists, we just thought, well, on one level, this is very complicated. This is a different context. This is a community where some people knew what was going on. But in another way, it was a very simple story. It was an institution that, without due care, empowered a man who had a predilection to abuse children, continuously built him up without checks, and then empowered him even more and marketed him. And then, when it came to light, wasn't entirely transparent about actually what had happened and how it would reflect culpability on their side. So, in a way, this was quite a conventional story, which we approached in the same ways as we would have anywhere.
Finn, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Diana.